Imagine you stand at the ski-in gate and the day tastes wrong. Your hands stick with resin from patching a shield rim, the kind of work that keeps splinters out of skin and keeps a man alive. You do not think about songs. You think about math. Food left. Water left. Arrows left. You hear the city breathe behind you, tight, tired, boxed in by its own stone. But the air suddenly changes. A runner slams into you so hard the resin smears across your knuckles. His eyes look past your face as if the wall already falls. He does not shout that the enemy comes. He says something worse: the storerooms burn. Inside the city. Therefore, the siege is no longer a line outside the walls. It is a fire inside your ribs. You sprint through the passageway, and the gate guards curse as you shove by. You see neighbors, not heroes, dragging jars, children, bedding, anything that might live through the night. A woman's arms lock around a bronze pot like it is a baby. A boy staggers under a sack that splits and spills grain like yellow teeth across the stones. Someone slips, scrapes a knee, screams, and no one stops, because stopping means choosing to die. You feel the press of bodies and the hard corners of panic. But the smoke arrives before the flames. It pours along the corridor, low and thick, and it hits your throat like a fist. You cough and taste bitter pitch. Therefore, you cover your mouth with the back of your wrist and push forward anyway. At the granary corridor, fire crawls along roof beams as if it has claws. The stored air turns into a furnace. You see sparks skitter up a wall and vanish into black. You hear shouting at the far end, metal on metal, a brief scream, then nothing. Fire does not start like this on its own. You feel that truth like a cold stone in the belly. Someone brings this flame here, or someone allows it, or someone cannot stop it. But there is no time for trials and speeches. Therefore, the only court is the corridor itself, and the sentence is heat. You push into the haze, and men stumble out with soot on their faces, eyes wide and empty as jars. Someone shoves a bucket into your hands. It is half full. It sloshes and spills as you run, and every drop that hits the floor hisses like an insult. You see a line of citizens forming, passing water hand to hand, but the line keeps breaking because people keep turning away to grab their own bundles. But a city under siege cannot afford private survival. Therefore, the line collapses, and the fire grows. You try to fight two wars at once, one against men beyond the walls, and one against disaster within them. Your arms know the weight of shield and spear, but now they learn the weight of water and the weight of carrying a child who cannot breathe. You hear a horn somewhere outside, distant but sharp. You do not know if it signals an assault or a trick. You do not know if the enemy watches the smoke and smiles. But you know this: a burning granary is not a wound. It is a death sentence that takes its time. You reach the storage jars sunk into the floor, the ones meant to hide grain cool in earth. You smash the seal on one with the heel of your hand. Dust bursts up. You plunge fingers into grain and feel too little. Half empty. The jar should be heavy with winter. It is light with betrayal. Someone rations too long or steals. You scoop a handful and chew it raw. It crunches like gravel. Your gums bleed. Your stomach still howls. But the raw grain does not give strength. It gives only the knowledge that the city already bleeds from the inside. Therefore, suspicion spreads faster than smoke. A man with a soot-black beard grabs your arm and spits words that scrape like stones. There are ships on the shore, he insists. The beach swarms. Another scout staggers in from the opposite direction, face cut, eyes frantic. The shoreline is empty, he swears. Only waves, only gulls, only silence. A third man pushes between them, shaking like fever. The ground moves near the southern wall, he says. The stones sing. None of them offers certainty. Each one offers a different nightmare. But a defender cannot wait for truth to become clean. Therefore, you choose what to believe with the same hands that hold a shield. You race uphill through lanes so steep carts cannot pass. You see a cart overturned anyway, its wheels spinning uselessly. Water must be carried by hand, bucket by bucket, arm by arm. But buckets vanish in chaos. A man runs past with two, and someone tackles him, and suddenly the buckets fly and water splashes into dust. You feel your throat taste like clay and ash. Therefore, you swallow nothing and keep moving. You reach a cistern line and grab a skin of water. It is warm, stale, but it is life. You force it toward the granary, but you slam into a knot of people. A mother screams for her child. A soldier screams for order. A merchant screams for his jars. The screams braid into one animal sound. You see a man shove another man into a wall to get ahead. You see a child drop a small bundle and stare at it as if deciding whether memory matters. But the smoke thickens and the fire feeds on hesitation. Therefore you push through, shoulder first, because gentleness becomes cruelty when time runs out. The roof beam inside the granary snaps. It is not a dramatic crack, it is a cannon blast of wood tearing. The beam falls and hits the floor and sparks leap. Heat blooms down the corridor, forcing you back step by step like a man losing a duel. You throw water and it turns to steam in midair. It does not even touch the flame. But steam blinds and people scream louder because they cannot see. Therefore the attempt to save becomes part of the disaster. You feel a jolt underfoot, small, like a heavy wagon rolling past, but there is no wagon. The stones tremble again, longer. Your knees feel it first, not your ears. A shiver runs through the masonry like a living thing. Earthquake? Or battering? You cannot tell. The wall above seems to groan, and dust sifts down like pale rain. But a city under siege expects rams, not the earth itself turning traitor. Therefore, every plan becomes fragile. You sprint back toward the gate, because if the wall fails now, fire and steel arrive together. You see men running the opposite direction, toward their homes, toward their families. Their faces do not look cowardly. They look human. But the gate does not care about human. Therefore, the gate waits for hands. You reach the courtyard near the choke point and collide with a crowd trying to escape smoke. Bodies press tight, and the crowd moves like water in a jar, shifting, surging, choking itself. Someone drops a clay jar. It shatters. The sound is sharp as a weapon. People stumble. A woman falls. Hands grab at her, but hands also grab at the space she occupies. The crowd becomes a weapon with no handle. You feel an elbow slam into your ribs. You taste blood, yours or someone else's. But there is no enemy spear here. Therefore you understand. A city can kill its own without meaning to. A soldier shouts for a line. You force your shield up, resin still tacky at the rim. The weight steadies you. The familiar curve presses into forearm and shoulder. You feel the old comfort of purpose. But purpose fractures when smoke pours into the courtyard and eyes water. Therefore you squint and try to see through a living fog. Then you notice a figure moving wrong. Not carrying water. Not dragging a child. Not shouting orders. Slipping along the smoke line where faces blur. The figure hugs walls, chooses shadows, pauses when someone looks, moves when someone coughs. Your skin tightens. You chase. But the floor is slick with spilled oil and your foot shoots out. You slam down hard. Your breath explodes out of you. Your shield skitters away with a scrape. The figure turns its head just enough for you to see nothing certain, only a shape, only intent. But the figure vanishes into a doorway and the doorway vanishes into smoke. Therefore suspicion stays alive. You push up, pain in hip, and snatch the shield back. You run again, but the air turns hotter near the granary, and the crowd thickens near the gate. Someone yanks your arm, begging you to help carry a coughing child. The child's hair stinks of smoke. You lift him, and he is lighter than he should be. Hunger already carves him, but lifting him costs speed. Therefore, every mercy becomes a tactical choice. A new sound cuts through the chaos, with splitting, iron biting, a hinge giving up. The gate does not open. It fails. You feel the pressure change, like a lung collapsing. The outside pushes in. Men on the wall shout, and their voices rise into panic. You hear the low roar of attackers beyond the stone, many throats, one appetite. But you cannot see them clearly through dust and smoke. Therefore you fight a sound before you fight a face. A defender near you slams a spear, but against the paving stones, shouting for a shield wall. You snap into place because training is faster than thought. You press your shield edge to the next shield. The rim grinds. Resin smears. The line forms in a heartbeat, imperfect but real. But the ground trembles again, and dust puffs from cracks, and a section of plaster falls from a wall. Therefore the city itself seems to join the enemy. A crack runs up a mud brick section near the gatehouse. It opens like a mouth. Stones shift. Someone screams the wall. Another screams hold. And both commands are true. You feel the old certainty. Stay at the breach. Hold the line. Die if needed. But you also feel the child in your arms cough wetly. He needs air. He needs a path away from smoke. Therefore you stand inside a choice that no poem answers. The attackers surge into the gap, not as a tidy line but as a flood. You see bronze flash, leather straps, teeth bared. A spear thrusts toward your face. You jerk your shield up and the spear skids, scraping wood and rattling your bones. You smell the attacker, sweat, onions, fear. You shove forward and the attacker stumbles. But another fills the space instantly. Therefore the fight feels endless, like trying to hold back a tide with a plank. An arrow slices past and into a post. Another clatters on stone. You do not know if the arrows come from outside or from the wall above in desperation. The air is too thick to track. But every shaft that flies inside the city is a betrayal of safety. Therefore you duck and push. A man beside you takes a blow on the head. His helmet dents and he drops like a sack. The line gaps. You feel panic surge up your throat. But panic makes the shield lighter and the arm weaker. Therefore you stomp into the fallen man's space, closing the gap, taking the next impact on your own rim. The child coughs again, and his small hand claws your shoulder. His nails bite through cloth. You turn your head just enough to see his eyes, wide and glossy. He cannot stay here. But if you move, the line breaks. Therefore you pass him backward without looking, trusting hands you cannot see. The child disappears into the crowd behind, swallowed by smoke and bodies. You do not know if he reaches safety. You do not know if he even remains in arms or drops to stones. But the shield line holds for another breath. A defender shouts that water runs out. Someone shouts that the granary roof collapses. Someone shouts that the southern wall cracks. You cannot verify any of it. But you feel the city buck under too many disasters at once. Therefore, every rumor becomes a weapon. A tremor hits stronger. This time the stones jump. Your teeth click. Dust erupts from the gatehouse like breath from a giant. For a heartbeat, the attackers hesitate, eyes flicking upward. They fear the same falling rock you fear. But hesitation does not last. Therefore the fight resumes with doubled fury. A chunk of mud brick drops onto a man's shoulder and crushes him down. Blood splashes dark against pale dust. Someone screams a name and dives toward him, and another attacker uses that dive to thrust a blade into the rescuer's ribs. The rescuer makes a sound like air leaving a wineskin. But the line cannot stop to mourn. Therefore the dead become obstacles underfoot. Smoke rolls through the breach now, sucked by the fire's hunger. It wraps around faces and turns everyone into silhouettes. You swing at a shadow and feel the shock of impact, bone or wood, impossible to know. You feel your arm go numb. But numbness is a luxury. Therefore you swing again. A shout comes from the wall, something about the horses. The word horse cuts through the roar like a knife. You do not know what it means in this moment, statue, omen, madness. But the word carries a strange weight, as if someone tries to make meaning out of chaos. Therefore you ignore it, because meaning does not block a spear. You brace your shield and feel another shove from the outside. The hinge area groans. The breach widens by inches. Inches become lives. But defenders on the flanks scramble to reposition, and the formation frays. Therefore you feel the line slipping. A man in fine cloth, too fine for a fighter, pushes forward with a dagger and eyes full of rage. He stabs at an attacker's thigh and screams like an animal. The attacker howls and backhands him, and the fine-clothed man collapses. But his dagger strike slows the attacker for one heartbeat. Therefore even the untrained buy time with blood. You smell something new, burning oil, sharp and greasy. Someone overturns a lamp. Flames race along spilled slick and climb a wooden beam. Fire joins the fight at the breach, licking at shields, biting at hair. A defender's sleeve catches, and he slaps at it, screaming. But slapping only spreads the flame. Therefore he rolls on the ground, and boots trample past him, because no one can stop. The gatehouse space turns into a crushing funnel. Outside pressure pushes in. Inside panic pushes out. The two forces collide on your shield. Your shoulder screams. Your legs shake. You feel you're in warmth somewhere in the crush. Someone loses control. You taste iron on your tongue, but you cannot breathe deep. Therefore every breath becomes a shallow theft. A horn blasts again, closer now, or maybe it only feels closer because fear changes distance. The attackers surge as if summoned. Defenders shout for retreat to the inner streets. But retreat through a crowd becomes slaughter. Therefore the order is impossible. The earth shudders one more time, and this time the tremor does not merely shake. It alters. A section of wall near the gate slumps, not collapsing cleanly but sagging, like wet clay. Stones grind. A crack opens wide enough to swallow a foot. An attacker steps wrong and his ankle snaps with a sound you hear even through the roar. He screams and goes down. But another attacker uses his body as a step. Therefore the earth kills impartially. Smoke thickens, and the fire inside the city grows brighter. A roof somewhere collapses fully, and the sound is like thunder trapped in stone. Ash drifts across the courtyard and sticks to sweat on your face. But ash also marks the wind of the fire's breath. Therefore you know the blaze spreads toward living quarters. A defender grabs your shoulder and shouts that children remain in a house near the granary. His eyes shine with tears that turn into muddy tracks on soot. You look toward the smoke and see nothing but black. You look toward the breach and see bronze and teeth. But you cannot be two men. Therefore you choose in 1 minute. You pivot and your shield line curses you, but the line already bends. You shove into an alley, running toward the smoke, because something in you refuses to let the city burn without pulling at least one life out of it. You hear behind you the crash of renewed fighting, the wet impacts, the screams. You do not know if the gate holds another heartbeat. But the smoke ahead thickens, and you hear coughing, small, thin, desperate. Therefore you run faster. A doorway appears, half hidden by drifting soot. Inside, heat pulses. You duck and enter, and your eyes sting so hard tears pour. You feel your way along a wall, fingertips dragging across rough plaster. You hear a child whimper, then a second. You find them huddled under a table, faces pressed into their sleeves. You grab one under each arm. They are limp with fear. But the roof creaks above like a threat. Therefore you do not comfort. You yank and drag and shove them toward the door. A beam drops behind you, slamming the floor, sending sparks. The children scream. You push them out into the alley, and the air there feels cold only because the inside is hell. But the alley is not safe either. Therefore you keep moving. You stumble into the courtyard again and see the breach area through smoke. Shapes churn. A defender's shield flies up and away, spinning, then clattering down. An attacker steps over a body and slips on blood. Someone laughs, high, broken, insane. But laughter here is not joy. Therefore it is terror wearing a mask. You shove the children into the press of fleeing citizens, shouting at strangers to take them. Hands grab. The children vanish into the moving mass, and again there is no certainty. You do not know if those hands belong to neighbors or predators. But there is no time to verify. Therefore you accept imperfect rescue. A sudden bright flare erupts near the granary corridor as stored oil catches. The flame whooshes outward, and the heat hits your face like a slap. People fall back, screaming. But the flame also blinds attackers near that side, and for a heartbeat the breach fight falters. Therefore disaster grants a small tactical mercy. Defenders exploit it. A cluster surges forward, pushing shields into the gap. You join them because fighting becomes the only way to keep the streets from becoming a killing ground. You slam your shield into an attacker's chest and feel ribs give. The attacker gasps and drops. But dropping does not remove danger, it creates a tripping hazard. Therefore you step around the body and brace again. Someone shouts that the king's house burns. Someone else shouts that the temples fall. The words slice through the smoke like thrown knives, aiming at morale. But morale cannot be patched like a shield rim. Therefore it frays. A man appears at the edge of vision, moving wrong again, quick, cautious, purposeful. He carries no wounded. He carries a torch, low hidden. He slips toward another storeroom. You lunge. He turns, startled, and for an instant his face shows, local, familiar, not an outsider. His eyes are not heroic. They are hungry. But he darts away into smoke before you can seize him. Therefore the enemy is not only outside the walls. The tremor returns, lighter now, like aftershocks. The wall stones settle and creak. A cracked section near the gatehouse sheds more debris. You duck as pebbles and dust rain down. But every tremor threatens to widen every crack. Therefore the city feels like a pot about to split. Hours compress into a blur of impacts and choking breaths. You fight. You run. You drag someone by the wrists. You lose your grip. You slam your shoulder into a door to make an escape path. You hear the wet sound of blade meeting flesh somewhere close and do not turn to see whose flesh it is. But turning costs time, and time costs life. Therefore you keep moving forward through a nightmare that never resolves. Then the black begins to thin. Not because victory arrives, but because the fire eats what it can and leaves a different kind of smoke. Dawn creeps up, pale and indifferent. It arrives like a verdict you do not request. You step over collapsed mud brick, and the ground still holds heat trapped beneath ash. The city is not a heroic tableau. It is inventory. Bodies missing. Jars smashed. Thresholds blackened. A wall section cracked like a broken tooth. You see a dog nosing at something in a corner and you shout it away, but the dog returns because hunger outranks shame. But a living city makes noise, markets, laughter, hammers. Therefore the silence here feels like punishment. You walk through what remains of the granary corridor. The roof is gone, replaced by jagged beams like ribs. Ash piles against walls. You see storage jars sunk into floors, some split by heat, some toppled. You see grain scattered and burned, useless as sand. You kneel and pinch ash between fingers. It smears black. But ash does not confess who lights the first torch. Therefore, the mind keeps hunting. Now the time detective inside you wakes up, because grief demands explanation. You look for what survives catastrophe, not in songs, but in stubborn fragments. You see arrowheads lodged where they should not be, inside the city line, at angles that suggest fighting in streets, not just on walls. You see a crushed skeleton in a doorway, ribs bent inward as if the house itself kills. You see a scatter of small bones near a threshold, too small, and the throat tightens again. But you also see masonry fractured in strange ways, blocks shifted without clean impact scars, cracks that run like lightning rather than like a ram's bite. Therefore, nature sits beside human violence at the table. You stand by the gatehouse and study the hinge stones. They show stress, but also sudden misalignment, like a jaw knocked sideways. You put a hand on the stone and feel nothing now, only cold. But memory supplies the trembling. Therefore, the question grows sharper. Does the earth help the attackers, or do attackers exploit the earth? The mind reaches outward beyond this hill, because rumor travels even faster than fire. You hear that other cities also shatter, not just yours. Palaces go dark. Trade routes snap. Kings lose grip. Raiders appear like wolves where roads once feel safe. But no single messenger carries a complete map. Therefore, the world feels like it catches fire in sections, one after another, until the entire region becomes a chain of burned rooms. Certainty refuses to appear. There is only a narrowed suspect list. A real Troy burns around 1190 BC. A siege strain starves it. Internal sabotage possibly gnaws it. An earthquake possibly loosens its bones. But the story refuses to become a clean verdict carved in marble. Therefore, the hill stays haunted by uncertainty. Now imagine a different kind of dust on your skin. The air changes. The smoke becomes dry earth. The roar becomes the scrape of metal on soil. You stand not on a battlement, but in a trench cut into Hisarlik in AD 1873. A pick sits in your hands. It feels heavier than a sword because every swing threatens to destroy the very thing you seek. The earth lies in layers like a stack of stories pressed flat by time. But a man with relentless eyes stands above, impatient. He demands speed. He wants Homer's Troy today, not tomorrow. Therefore, the pick rises and falls with dangerous enthusiasm. You strike soil. It breaks. You strike again. Pottery fragments appear, curving, painted, then gone as the pick shatters them. Someone shouts to keep digging deeper, faster. You taste grit. You feel sweat run down spine. But each blow removes context, and context is truth. Therefore, the search for a legend becomes a threat to evidence. You look at the trench wall and see bands of color, dark, pale, dark, each band a different life of the hill. But the digging cuts like a knife through a book, slicing chapters out. Therefore, the hill burns twice, once in fire, once in excavation. The scene snaps again. Imagine fluorescent light instead of dawn. You hold a map in AD 1996. The map is not poetry. It is lines, grids, traces. A radar printout shows a shadow that could be a wall or a mirage. Funding clocks tick louder than drums. Reputations tick. The past does not reveal itself for free. But the ground hides answers under silence. Therefore, you argue in meetings, measure again, scan again, dig carefully, because careful is the only apology possible to the dead. Back on the hill in the mind, you feel the weight of all three moments pressing together. The burning city, the violent trench, the cautious scan. Each moment wants a different story. The burning wants blame. The trench wants glory. The scan wants proof. But proof never arrives as a single shining object. Therefore, the lesson is not believe or doubt. The lesson is follow the layers. Dawn on the destroyed city now feels like the closing of a hand. The verdict counts itself in absence. A granary that feeds no one. A gate that protects no one. A household line that ends in ash. You see survivors with hollow cheeks staring at the ground as if the ground steals their future. You hear a woman calling a name again and again until the name becomes only a sound. But survival does not feel like triumph. Therefore, it feels like carrying a ruined shield that still weighs the same. Now the mirror turns toward the present day and it cuts. You live in a world that also builds identities on stories, national stories, family stories, heroic stories. But stories can turn into weapons, used to justify war, pride, possession. You see the pattern because it repeats. A beautiful song becomes a single piece of evidence in a court that demands certainty. But certainty is seductive, and seduction makes people careless. Therefore, Troy teaches a harder skill, living inside uncertainty without surrendering to it. You follow layers. You count wounds. You listen for what does not fit. You refuse to let one perfect narrative erase inconvenient ash. But refusing is not comfortable because doubt feels like standing in smoke, unable to see. Therefore, courage sometimes means staying with the unclear until the clearer arrives. The hill that burns twice leaves a final question that no search box solves. When the gate begins to fail, when the storerooms burn, when rumors conflict, when the ground itself shakes, what story do you choose to believe, and what human life do you sacrifice to keep that story alive?